and boop, boom, 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 digga 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 boom, 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 digga 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 boom, 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 digga 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 doom, 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 ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba. Starting the stream up now. Gonna take a crap on capitalism. Lame. 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 One of the reasons why I think I've been getting pushed out of TikTok and all that is because I swear too much. And so I'm trying to not swear so much. I'm trying not to be like loose lips sink ships. Hey, Cotton, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. Good to see you guys out of TikTok land. Hope you guys are all doing well out there. Looking to see. Good to see you guys. Good to see you guys. We have an array of articles. We have things that are worth talking about today in regards to the total apocalypse that is upon us. And in the midst of that apocalypse, I went and got some wings today. So I'm feeling good about myself, right? Went and got some half-price wings. Ate them. They were extremely spicy. Not as spicy as they have been. Like, there's this establishment that I go to that does half-price wings, and I keep walking in there, and I keep telling them, these wings, make them as spicy as you can. And I just don't think they believe me. Like, the waitress came to me, and it wasn't the usual waitress, it was a different waitress. She came to me, and she was like, are you okay? Is everything fine? And I was like, eating them, I'm like, yeah, these are fine. If they're spicy, but, like, they're fine. Like, I wasn't like, like, I want to eat something that is so spicy that I'm worried it's going to kill me. That's what I want. I want to get something that's so spicy. I think I am at the point now where I think I might need to walk in to like an actual Indian restaurant that's like actual Indian food and just be like, I want something that is so spicy that it actually might kill me. Like I want it to trigger my fight response. That's what I want. Rusty, good to see you. That guy, good to see you guys. So glad that you guys are here. That's right, Rusty, third, right? And what's wrong with being third, right? Dude, you got to take a trip to Turkey for your hairline. Just the absolute classic stuff. I know, right? I actually have done quite well. My father and brother were both bald by the time that they were 20, so I've done quite well for myself, I think. Ah, man, TikTok. Always coming up with the best. No, don't do it. They just add more cayenne, if you say so. Gotta try to enjoy the small things in life. That's right. That's what I keep telling my girlfriend. Hey! Yeah, I mean, we are kind of at that point, aren't we? I know for myself, I am at the point where I am actually talking to the people around me in my life, being like, so we're just going to go, like, buy a piece of property somewhere, and I'm just going to, like, live in a shack, and we're just going to grow food, right? Like, that's kind of where I'm getting to, because, like, there's nothing here for this system. Like, I'm looking at people who have, like, literally done all of the quote-unquote right things, and these people are just getting completely abandoned. My favorite thing that's happening right now that I keep seeing, there's this fellow on TikTok. His name is Moron Millennial, right? But he's obviously, like, extremely well-read and knows things about the housing market. And he has taken to comparing what you can purchase here in Toronto and Vancouver, here in Canada, and he takes that price point and then compares it to European castles. What European castle can you get for the price of the house? And he walks you through the house, and he's just like, here it is, this is the house, the listing of the house and all this, and this is being listed for $2 million. So for this price point, you could buy this island. And then he shows you like a developed island that you can buy for that same price point as this place in Toronto. Like it's ridiculous, right? It's absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, van by the river, because I'm living in a van down by the river. Yeah, you got to ask them to bring up the spice that makes them worry. Absolutely, Cotton. Absolutely. Castles don't have central air. Checkmate, atheists. Got it. Are you part of the Communist Party? There is a Communist Party here in Toronto, and I have been connecting with them. I need to get a little bit better at it, honestly. And I actually think that one of the things that really does need to start happening is that we all need to start organizing locally. That getting on this TikTok thing or getting on YouTube and all that kind of stuff, like, that's great and all for like spreading awareness. But I know for myself, I think the challenge for myself is going to be setting up a monthly meetup. I think that's the thing that I'm going to encourage others to do, and I think I need to do for myself, is just set up a monthly meetup to just straight up say, hey, if you think that this system is in free fall collapse and you think that we can do better than this, we need a monthly meetup to scare the shit out of these capitalists. Dragon fruit, that's a really lovely thing to say. That's a really lovely thing to say. Dragon fruit says, great to see you live again. Your streams help a lot. Well, there you go, bud. That makes me feel real good about myself, I gotta tell you. Because I think that what we are witnessing is an enormous decline. It's a decline that's going to happen very quickly. And I think the role that I think I play in all of this is to deal with the existential aspect of it. That it's not strictly economic, what we're dealing with. That there's a very existential aspect to this, a very emotional aspect to this. That we are experiencing this massive decline. And I think a big part of what I am trying to achieve here is to break apart the gaslighting. To just call it what it is, that people like your Petersons and your Shapiros and your Crowders and your Musks and all of these guys, like, they're gaslighting us. And it's pretty obvious that they're gaslighting us. And so to break that apart and then to deal with the reality of what it is to live in a world that's being run by grifters, and how to move forward from that is sort of the challenge for all of us. No free fall, you're just lazy. Okay, bud. Maybe learn to spell. Right? Jesus. The gaslighting is everywhere, right? And people fall for it in incredible ways. That, like, oh, you're just lazy, even though I'm literally watching like doctors and lawyers and engineers who can't buy houses anymore. Like, it's just embarrassing at this point. And like, it's stuff like that that really shows you pretty clearly that what we're experiencing is a worship of stupidity. Like, it's just this lack of even a desire to be intelligent at all. And that the fall of the Western civilization is the worship of money, the worship of the self, and the worship of stupidity. And so when I see people come in and just like spam the chat with just this dumb "you're lazy" stuff, it's pretty clearly just a worship of stupidity, just an inability to engage with reality in a meaningful way, and to project the inability and their own inability to grapple with reality in a meaningful way upon others. Like, that's what I'm witnessing. It doesn't like offend me at all. My sister lives on the East Coast, bud. Like, houses. Yeah, you just gotta lift up your whole life, leave your friends and family, and just go to the East Coast, bro. Like, okay, bud. There's lots of jobs. Yeah, there's lots of jobs and things going on the East Coast for sure. Yeah, that's definitely a solution. And if everybody does it all at once, it'll definitely not raise prices suddenly and cause problems for everybody. Like, you're just not engaging with reality in a way that's meaningful. That's just the truth. Like it's not a solution, right? Like, it's just a dismissal. Just rip apart your life and everything will be totally fine. Hey, buddy. Just rip apart your life and everything will... Sorry, guys. Somebody just knocked on my door. 1 second. No, bud. Okay. I don't know how a Bell representative got into the building, but... Okay, anyway. Moving on from that. I talk about this all the time on my show, right? Like, how do we... Like, we are experiencing a dramatic collapse downwards, right? Like, we literally have global temperatures likely to rise beyond 1.5 Celsius limit within the next 5 years. There's a enormous upspike of climate change destruction that is obviously coming. We've got wildfires in Alberta right now, and huge sections of the populace are just not engaging in reality. Like, they're coming out with these solutions, and they're saying these solutions in the most condescending tone that's absolutely possible. Yeah, just move, bro. Right? Like, it's so embarrassing. And so it's being made very clear to people who are attempting to grapple with reality and find solutions in reality that we live in a society that is not interested in engaging in reality, and is just not interested in engaging seriously and engaging in reality in serious ways. That the question for future generations is going to be, how did these people become so delusional? How did they become so overwhelmingly detached from reality? How did they start worshiping their own ignorance and stupidity to such a degree that they were proud of how stupid they were? That's really what we are struggling with and what we are dealing with. And it's not just stupidity; it's also cruelty, right? That I had something here. Here we go. Right. From the National Post, 1/3 of Canadians are fine with prescribing assisted suicide for homelessness. Right? Like, this is something that just came out. And if you dig into it, so basically, like, 1 out of every 4 people you talk to is basically just like, yeah, if you're homeless, you could just commit suicide. You know? Like, I don't think that we can recover this society if it's going to act this way. Like, I don't think that there is a solution anymore. That I think that what we're looking at is a society that is tearing itself apart on purpose, that the people who have the wealth and are in the position of status and prestige are happy it's falling apart. They want to tear it apart. They're glad that it's falling apart. That they view their neighbors and they view their fellow citizens as a burden that they want to dismiss, right? That's why they're telling people to move, right? Just get out of here so we don't need to deal with you anymore, right? They're happy to see Canada be ripped apart. They're happy to see the United States be ripped apart. And that's precisely what's going to happen. And when people come in here and try to say these incredibly stupid things as if they're actually trying to help, we have to acknowledge that what it is gaslighting. That's what it is. It's just straight up gaslighting. And it's just straight up people saying to us, I'm happy to see that you're dying, and I'm happy to see that you die. Go away. It's just dismissal. Like, we shouldn't take it very seriously. Yeah, if you aren't producing, then why are you alive at all? Matthew, good to see you, bud. Zed, good to see you too. Mr. Cheese Monkey, good to see you, bud. Quick question, if you don't mind, regarding the current political parties that are available for federal elections. Do you believe there needs to be a reform to current parties or a whole new roster? So, Mr. Cheese Monkey, really good question, right? Really good question. Matthew, Ligadizee was joking. Ligadizee a regular around here, and he was just joking. Don't take what Ligadizee says seriously. He's just joking. And Ligadizee, don't start a fight, sir. Oh yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, Ligadizee's in here being like, just move, bro. No, that's what the TickTock kids do, dude. That's for TikTok. So, okay, Cheese Bucket, to answer your question. The system cannot be reformed, right? The system can't be reformed, nor can you just get rid of the roster and replace people with the roster. Because the trouble is the system itself. That the system itself is absolutely disinterested in producing anything about the Milo. The system itself can only produce more of itself, right? It can only produce either like complete psychopaths who usually are just conservatives, right? The 1/3 of people who are fine with homeless people committing suicide, right, as a cure for homelessness, or just sycophantic liberals who are only really willing to tilt their head ever so slightly and go, "Oh, I'm so sorry for you," while doing basically nothing about it. And that's basically the choice that we are usually given. We're really only given a choice ever between, "Oh, I'm so sorry for you. We'll try to make it. We'll try to talk to your capitalist owners so that they'll give you a pizza break," right? Like that's the best that you'll ever get. And the system, if somebody were to come into the system saying, "Who are these fucking capitalists? Who are these capitalists? Why are we paying any attention to these capitalists? Like who cares what Bill Gates has to say about a single thing? We should take all his land away from him. Who cares whatsoever? He didn't earn it. What are you talking about?" If somebody was actually in the system or attempted to get into the system that was saying those sorts of things, they would just be removed, right? That the system vets those people out on purpose. And so the system can't be reformed, nor can you just rely on voting somebody else in. That the entire system needs to be collapsed down. And we need to redraw our Constitution. Like, I say that all the time. We need to redraw our Constitution. That the Constitution of our countries, like, the American Constitution was made by literal slavers. Like, literally people who owned slaves. That, James Madison outright said that the purpose of the Constitution was to keep to keep power within the wealth of the nation, to make sure that it's the rich people that are in power, right? He stated it explicitly. I think he was referring to the Senate when he said it, and and so the idea that we can just like do like some kind of band-aid reform or just some kind of like minor tweak here and there, when the system was made by literal slavers to ensure that their slavery would be maintained, is it's a joke. It's a total farce. It's not going to happen. And the idea that it's just, oh, you just need to support the right candidate. The only reason you should support, quote unquote, the right candidate is to scare the hell out of these people. That's the only reason that you should do it. You shouldn't do it to expect that that person is going to actually attain power, because that's probably not going to happen, right? You shouldn't do it for that purpose. You should do it to scare the hell out of the capitalists, to force them to spend resources to stop you, to force their hand, which is exactly what it's going to come down to. Like, and the God's honest truth, man. Like, let's be really straightforward. If, let's say it happened, let's say someone ran as an independent to be the president of the United States, and they were straight up like, we should alleviate poverty, who cares about these capitalists, oh my God, we need to do something about all this kind of stuff. And let's say they gathered in force, and the American people all gathered together and were like, that's right, and they all lifted this person up above their heads and was just like, yeah, and they started polling and hugely and all that kind of stuff. That person would be killed. Like, that person will be shot. Like I don't know why we think something else will happen, right? Like, I don't know why we think that if we just get someone into the electoral system and they ascend and actually do it. No, they won't. There'll be a drive-by. That person will be shot, right? Like they shot Kennedy, like they shot Martin Luther King, like they shot Fred Hampton, right? What you think that, like, when the CIA put their guy into the presidency, which was the first Bush, what, you think that they were saying out loud that, oh yeah, these are free and open elections? Like, it's over. And it's been over for a long time. That what we are experiencing now as a populace is just a populace coming to terms and starting to wake up and recognize that, oh yeah, this isn't an electoral system. Like, this is like an illusionary fart of an electoral system. This is like a puppet show version of an electoral system. That they put the show on so long as the public allows it to persist. And as soon as it's no longer useful, they'll just get rid of it. That's all. As soon as it's not useful, they'll just get rid of it. And the idea that something else is going to happen is sort of wild. Like, it's sort of wild to think about. That, like, American history is littered with political assassinations. Like, and for some reason we just think that, like, oh yeah, what'll happen is we'll vote somebody in and they definitely won't get shot by the CIA. That definitely won't happen. Like, yeah, it certainly will. Like, it certainly will. And so the solution is not to look to electoral politics anymore. That electoral politics is, like, interesting to pay attention to as, like, a cultural artifact, and interesting to interact with as a way to force the hands of capitalists and to scare them, right? But real power exists in the streets. Real power exists in the participation in the labor market. Real power exists when the people gather en masse and actually cease to participate in the system at all and begin to simply ignore what it has to say. And it's going to get very obvious as we move forward that the only way that the system of capital can justify its existence is through violence. That it has perpetrated a myth and a total farce and a total fabrication and a total lie for the last 50, 60 years, that somehow capitalism is about voluntary is about people voluntarily trading with one another. You have to be absolutely daft to think that this is the truth. But, like, we are dealing with theocratic fascists, right? We're dealing with people who literally think a wizard is coming back at any moment. And straight out death cultists who literally worship the moment of their death. That this place sucks, but it'll be better when we die, right? And it's just not going to... That if we just keep funneling energy into their systems, it's just never going to get any better. And it's likely not going to get any better. That as the death cult continues forward, the place is just going to start burning down. Like, quite seriously, right? There is a 98% chance of the hottest year on record being broken by 2027. Scientists have warned. Like, if the temperatures rise above 2 degrees Celsius, like, this place is going to ignite. Like, you can't just continuously raise the temperature and expect it to not ignite. Isaac, good to see you, bud. Happy to hear that. Everyone is waiting for their Messiah, but the Messiah will always get taken care of if they are a danger to the capitalist system. Well, and that's what's so funny, Tinker. Like, the moral of the Messiah story, the moral of Christ's story, is that he gets crucified. Like, that's the moral of the story. Like, the idea of the Christ narrative is that there isn't a Messiah that's going to come to overwhelm the state. That the state will kill that person. But that the message of the Messiah will persist, and the culture around it will change, and the state will not be able to persist. That's the true message of Christ. That it's not about overwhelming the state and taking over the state. It's about changing the culture to such a degree that the state can no longer persist. That the state can no longer survive in the way that it does. That people simply begin to refuse to, like, someone has to drive the nail into the leg of the person and put the cross up, right? Someone has to do that. If you want to have the system of crucifixion in place, if you want to have the system of slavery in place, if you want to have the prison industrial complex in place, well, someone needs to do those things. Someone needs to take care of the prison system. Someone needs to press the button to drop the bomb. Someone has to manufacture the bomb. Someone has to do these things. And the message of Christ is to say, stop participating in it. Stop doing these things. Stop waiting for a Messiah that will be crucified. Stop waiting for that person, and instead cease participating in a system that perpetuates this obvious, overt, crazed death cult. Yeah, Christ is a communist, of course. Good to see you, Serge. Good to see you, Tesco. Good to see you guys. Yeah, we have a global warming denier, eh? That's fun. Yeah, the new brand of global warming denialists are about as delusional as it gets. Like, it's on the same level as Jesus Christ is coming back tomorrow. Like, it's pretty nuts, actually. It's pretty wild that, like, this new iteration of climate change denial is, like, it's proud of its stupidity. It's proud of how little it knows. And people will literally, like, I have had people give me evidence that climate change exists and say this disproves climate change's existence. And I'm like, I don't think you actually read this. And then they say, yeah, I read this and it disproves climate change. And then I read it and I say to them the conclusion that says, so we must be very concerned about the future of rising climate in the world. And I'm like, this confirms climate change. And they just continue to persist. Like, it's just this worship of stupidity at this point. That no, man, it's a global conspiracy. Like, why in the world would any of the world powers put forward this narrative that climate change is happening when it's obviously against their interests? Like, it's obviously against their interests. Like, it's just absolutely maddening. Like, and it's just wild to know that we are going out this way. Like, it's wild to know that we're going out this delusionally. Like, that humanity and certainly the Western Empire is going out, and that the people who are at the very top of it are going out in with such a pathetic just stupidity, right? Just like completely checked out of reality, completely disengaged from anything that is even remotely existing in a real space. The evidence for climate change is overwhelming. Like, it's overwhelming. And yet people still deny its existence. It's pretty wild. Like, it's flat earther. Like, that's the part about it. Like, I wish I had have taken flat eartherism more seriously. Not specifically for the flat earth reason, but just for the type of thinking, right? That I wish that I had have formulated stronger arguments and better ways to confront the flat earthers. Because I basically took a look at the flat earthers and just said, okay, well, that's kind of nutty and kooky, but I guess they're not hurting anyone. But that type of thinking, that flat eartherism, that inability to engage with reality in a serious way, has now infected very serious things. Very, very, very serious things. Like climate change, right? And now we have people who, like, it's very much as though there is an army that is kicking in doors in their city, and they're just sitting there going, there's no army. Like, what are we supposed to do about this at this stage in the game? What are we supposed to do about this? Right? Yeah, you've been played, but by who? Who's done the playing? Right? Like the Illuminati, right? Like the what to what benefit? Who benefits by having the entire world consensus What's up, buddy? Who benefits from lying about climate change, eh? Who's the beneficiary? Literally, you've got the oil companies admitting it. Literally, the people that control the media. Okay, name names. You seem to know more about this than the people who've actually studied it, so name names. The pug demands cuddles. Adam Smith. Well, the Adam Smith. Thoughts on Lenin's book, Left-Wing Communism and Infantile Disorder. I think that book is a timely book. What I mean by that is I think that it was useful for when it was written and for the people it was written for, but to treat it as if it is a holy doctrine that should be adhered to at all costs is a mistake. A pretty bad mistake, if you ask me. That, Lenin was writing about a very specific group of people during a very specific period of time. And in a different culture, in a different place, with different circumstances. And so to take that, because what communists will often do is take that book and use it as a weapon against anarchists. And I don't think that's useful. I just don't think that's useful. Thoughts on Hegel? I mean, Marx liked him, right? At this point, only an apocalyptic event would probably get an remaining government to take climate change seriously. No. I think that the world governments are ready for the apocalyptic event. I think that the governments of the world are well aware of what's going to happen, and they're basically just using a strategy of lean in. Right? That's the strategy. Well, the water levels are coming up, so lean into it. What are we going to do about it? And the American strategy is basically just control and dominate the coasts as the water comes up, and just continue the process of extraction and abandonment. Right? That's essentially the strategy. It's just to make sure that the refugee crisis that it creates doesn't affect the rich. That's essentially the American solution at this point. Adam Smith asks, thoughts on Bernie Sanders and Richard Wolff? I think that Bernie Sanders is well-meaning and that he is trying to fight the good fight internally. But we'll see. We'll see if his legacy persists. I don't think Bernie Sanders will ever become the president, but I think that it's possible that people could infect the system to enough of a degree so that the capitalists need to respond to it. And they will. These capitalists will reinstitute crucifixion if they have to, right? They'll do it. And we're dealing with full-blown psychosis at this point. As you can see in our TickTock, right? Just straight up climate change denial, just straight up the disconnection from reality is pretty astounding to watch. And Richard Wolff is the GOAT. Right, Richard Wolff is the strongest voice in communism right now. Yeah, Richard Wolff. If you are just coming into an awareness of communism and an awareness of Marxism, Richard Wolff should be your starting point. It should be your starting point because he's very concise. Concise would be the word that I would use. That he takes his time to make sure you're coming along for the ride, but he doesn't get bogged down in the technicalities of it. He wants you to understand what Marxism is and does a very good job of it. And there's some great criticisms of Adam Smith, the historical figure, not the viewer, in Jacob Soley's latest book. Yeah, I mean, of course Adam Smith can be critiqued. He was the first guy really writing about an emerging system, right? And Adam Smith, he himself was also a capitalist. It seems to me that Adam Smith was he was a capitalist, but he sort of understood, he was sort of naive about it, I think. That he was sort of hoping that the system was going to level out, and it didn't. It didn't. It plunged itself face first into total slavery. Yeah, they're ready to use the climate catastrophe to further enrich themselves while letting everyone else suffer and die. Yep, that nails it. Disaster capitalism taking to the extreme. Yeah, absolutely. Why is it that the TikTok comments that are so brain dead? Because I think they're little kids. That's why. Literally. I think that the adults actually leave TikTok and come to the YouTube channel. Like, it's right there, right? I'm talking about YouTube. You can find it in the description. And so that's where the adults go, right? And I can tell pretty clearly that I've been shadow banned again, right? Like when I first launched yesterday, I'd been gone for 2 weeks, had 200 viewers right away, got about 1,000 likes pretty much instantly, and then the thing dropped down, and I've been shadow banned again, right? So it's pretty straightforward. Thoughts on David Ricardo? I don't know enough about David Ricardo to really comment on him. Like, I don't know everything about everything, right? Yeah, carbon capture tech will save us, guys. Absolutely. Vijay Prashad is probably better than Wolff. And Varoufakis is an absolute economy beast. Yeah. But this is what I say, is that Wolff is a really, really good place to start. That if you're literally... if you're literally sitting there going, I don't know anything about this, Wolff is a great place to be. Yeah, how much of TikTok chat is just from ChatGPT? I wonder about that. Just wait till the banks lower interest rates again. You'll see real estate investors flock back and binge of cheap debt and make housing even more unaffordable. Yep. Like, I keep seeing a narrative emerge that people are saying, like, something's got to give. No, it doesn't. Like, no, it doesn't. Like, it doesn't need to give. Right? It doesn't need to give. That the wealthy are more than happy to plunge us into a state of feudalism. They are more than happy to use police force against the poor. They're more than happy to do that. Like, and while they're doing it, they'll keep telling themselves how good, it's unfortunate, but these things have to be done. And the deep shame of it is that it would just be cheaper to house people, right? That it's actually more expensive to do it this way. But, I think the very first thing that we should say about this, Jeffrey Epstein moved $270,000 for Noam Chomsky and paid $150,000 to Leon Botstein. I think the very, 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 very first thing that we should immediately think about this is interesting how the Wall Street Journal is heavily reporting on Jeffrey Epstein's ties to Noam Chomsky and not anybody else. Right? Interesting, eh? Interesting how we're getting article after article after article about Noam Chomsky and Jeffrey Epstein and, like, no one else. Like, really weird how that works, eh? Really strange how that works. So, to me, this is a nothing burger. That, like, Noam Chomsky works for MIT, right? That, like, Jeffrey Epstein was also tied up into, like, many different systems. Oh, I know, buddy. I know. And so if you want to draw a connection between these two, you can do it. And that's basically what the Wall Street Journal is doing. They're just basically going, oh, there's Jeffrey Epstein standing across the street. And there's Noam Chomsky also standing across the street. So Jeffrey Epstein and Noam Chomsky standing across the street from one another. That's essentially what this is. And they're basically just reporting that Epstein was a rich guy that floated in the same circles as Noam Chomsky did, right? And, like, of course Chomsky wants to be amongst the wealthy and powerful. Like, the last article that they reported on was this, like, Jeffrey Epstein and Noam Chomsky met up. It's like, but it turns out that the reason why Noam Chomsky was there was because the leader of, like, Jordan was also there, and so Noam Chomsky wanted to have a meeting with, like, the leader of Jordan. I think it was, I don't remember if it was actually Jordan, but it was like the leader of a country, like the leader of a country. That's pretty obviously, like, Noam Chomsky is there for that reason, and that Epstein was just in the room because that's how it works, right? That Epstein's just this creepy little weirdo that the CIA uses to try to do exactly this, right? To try to do exactly this. Like, Epstein is a tool that gets spread around to blackmail and connect people to shitty things so that they can bribe and blackmail people. And I know, buddy. I know. And they're doing it, right? And they're doing it. Like, it's real straightforward. And when Noam Chomsky dies, just watch what happens, guys. Like, when Noam Chomsky dies, the mainstream media is going to pile a bunch of lies on top of them. I have read Das Kapital a long time ago. A couple years ago now. Okay, buddy. Okay. Milo. Bro. You're good. I know I'm talking, and I've got to be talking to you, right? I've got to be talking to you. Good boy, buddy. Good boy. Good boy, buddy. Good boy. Ugh. I wish they wouldn't make the shadow ban so obvious. Like, literally yesterday, I hit record and I had like 2,000 likes by now. At one point I had 200 viewers. Like, they've just made it so obvious. Like, it's pretty crazy. Was it easy to understand? No. Like, take a run through it a couple. It's very dry. I mean, this is the way I'll talk about it, Adam. It is easy to understand. It is actually quite easy to understand, but it's dry and it's dense and it takes a lot to go through. And so it's not that it's not easy to understand, it's that it requires your attention, right? It requires your attention. That's the reason why it's considered so difficult, is that it just requires your attention. And if you don't have the attention to give to it, then you're not going to, right? Then you're not going to. Is Das Kapital Marx's most important book? I mean, Capital is a set of volumes. It's a set of books. I got an excited little pug here. I haven't read it. I don't need to read Capital to know I'm getting ripped off. Like, I would argue that the Communist Manifesto is probably his most important work, because it's the one that has proliferated the most. And yeah, I tried Capital on audiobook at bedtime. It was a mistake. Yeah. Like, I do recommend it as an audiobook. Like, it's but again, like, it's dry. And David Harvey's videos on Capital are good. Yeah. He helps walk you through it, certainly. Oh my goodness. Just got you on my For You page. You ain't shadow banned no more. I hope so, bud. I hope so, bud. We'll see. We'll see. Like, I just, like, I know people on TikTok who have had their stuff banned, right? There's a guy, especially Midwestern Marks. He's literally been banned on TikTok 5, 6, 7 times. And it's just, like, so obvious that they're going after communists and socialists. Like, it's so obvious. And they make it obvious, right? Buddy. What is happening over there? You're okay. I know, I'm talking. I'm in a room, talking by myself. I know. Wow. Das Kapital is like trying to eat a giant plate of hardtack. Yeah. It does have that kind of quality, doesn't it? It does have that kind of quality, doesn't it? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. This guy defends and loves North Korea. That should tell you everything about him. I mean, I would suggest that you don't know anything about North Korea, right? Like, if you don't know anything about the subject, then you can basically just think what you like, right? And it's pretty much that simple. Like, it's like North Korea is it's a country that shouldn't really exist, right? That America basically destroyed South and North Korea in the Korean War, and then obviously went through a massive rebuilding effort so that they could say, look how great capitalism is. But, like, the fact that North Korea stands as it does is a true testament to communism, right? It's really amazing how they've been able to rebuild and able to withstand and have been able to defend themselves. Like, there was a point in the history of North Korea where the entire country was leveled. Like, the Americans went in and completely leveled it to the ground. And the idea that Americans have this sort of snide attitude towards North Korea is pretty indicative of sort of the psychopathic nature of the system, right? Like, we basically went over there, burnt their country to the ground, and then sneer at them for not surrendering. That's more or less what we've done. Engels on Authority. Have you read anything of Newton? Yeah. I've read a lot of Newton's theology. Like, I used to be a fundamentalist Christian, right? So I read a lot of Thomas Aquinas, a lot of Augustus, and a lot of Newton, right? Modern thinkers don't really know this about Newton, but Newton was a really robust theological writer. And he wrote a lot about the nature of Christ and the nature of God. And in many ways, I think he's something of a Rosetta Stone for modern scientists. That if modern scientists, especially the atheist types, want to have a stronger understanding of what religious attitudes actually are, then they should probably read more of Newton. Because Newton actually had a lot to say about the nature of reality, science, and its connection to this theological idea of what God is, and the nature of our existence within that reality. And I don't think that Newton is like the bottom line of theological thinking, but I do think that he's really strong in that regard. Thoughts on Noam Chomsky? I think that he's, when it comes to his works internally, he's like, his critique of the American empire domestically is very strong. And that's my thoughts about Noam Chomsky. That when he starts to critique other nations, like especially communist nations, I think that he's about as well read as the average citizen. And his opinions are pretty much the same as the average citizen. But when it comes to his critique of the American empire and its domestic acts internally, I think he's very, very strong. Newton was a creationist. I mean, Newton discussed the concept of God. He understood what the concept of God was, and he discussed it within the framework of his scientific work. Yeah. But I wouldn't say that Newton was a creationist. Like, creationists are a bit of a different beast. But yeah, like Newton wrote that he explicitly stated in some of his work that God is the collective of all things. That's sort of the definition that Newton uses. And so what's frustrating about what happens in the modern conversation today, and you can see it from the atheists, is that that when they engage with theology, they act as though God is an internal force inside of the universe. So, like, you think like the giant spaghetti monster, right, or the teapot floating around in space, or any of these sort of parodies that they use. Well, all of those things are objects that exist within the universe. And what Newton was saying, and what most theologians have said throughout time, is that the universe exists within the larger structure of God, and that God is the universe, and that the universe is God, and that we are part of that larger body. So if you're sitting there as an atheist with that kind of parody in mind, then I don't think you're actually engaging with the subject. Like and that's the truth of it. Like, I just don't think you're engaging seriously with the subject. And so it makes it very difficult to have a serious conversation with people. Right? And it's very much like it's kind of where we're at with a lot of different subjects these days. Like, you can't really have a serious conversation if someone's not going to seriously engage in the subject. And it's easy to lampoon something like theology. It's easy to do that if all you're going to do is be like, giant spaghetti monster, that's what it is. Okay. It's unserious. Like, it's just unserious thinking. It doesn't want to engage seriously with the subject. And most of the atheist thinkers that I've seen think this way, and they don't really want to grab a hold of what's actually being said. That they're successful when it comes time to debate, like, evangelicals, because evangelicals are frauds, and it's easy to debate a fraud, right? Like, it's easy to debate a grifter. It's easy to win a debate against somebody who thinks that God is a man walking around giving out fish. Like, that's easy. But if you want to actually engage seriously in the subject, then it gets a lot more difficult. Like, I remember a conversation, not a very well-known one, a conversation that Richard Dawkins had with Rowan Atkinson, not Mr. Bean, but the Archbishop of Canterbury of the Anglican Church. And he was just very soft-spoken, and not like, he wasn't trying to condemn anybody or trying to come down on anybody, but he was just explaining the theological position. And you could see in the conversation that Dawkins was like kind of taken aback by it. He didn't know how to engage with it. He kept trying to circle back around to his usual talking points. And essentially Atkinson just kind of looked at him and was just like, that's literally not what's being said. It's just not what we're discussing. And he describes and he attempts to describe what is being discussed, but Dawkins never really engages with it. And so it's created this culture of disengagement and this culture of not wanting to engage seriously in the subject, which is frustrating. Handsome boy, good to see you. Good to see you. Anyway, I'll get off that subject. I know some people are pretty tedious on that and they don't want to. I did a little artwork for Midwestern Marks. Yeah, Eddie's a great guy. Shame how much content is lost forever thanks to TikTok. Yep. Yeah, that's right. Like, these capitalists don't care. Like, they don't care. They'll destroy everything if they have to. Yeah, I can't blame Newton here since the theory of evolution had not been... But the theory of evolution doesn't actually... Like, this is sort of an odd thought, that the theory of evolution dunks on theology. Like, it doesn't actually. That when I was growing up, I was in a Christian school, and we accepted the theory of evolution. That the theory of evolution was just explaining the process by which creation came to be. That's more or less the thinking. And the like, I don't consider myself a Christian, by the way, but I definitely have a theological understanding of the world around me. That I don't think that I'm disconnected in some way from the world that exists around me. Like, I think that we are all like a collective energy, that we're all working to understand what this place is collectively and together, and we're basically just wasting our time, which is why it's so frustrating. That we could actually sit down and have a serious conversation about the nature of reality and why we're all here. But instead, we're all just scrabbling around for scraps, trying to, find the best way to jerk off, more or less. Handsome boy, why's the West don't like us Russian? What's the problem? We didn't seem to do anything to them. Where's the hatred of the Western people for the Russians and the Russians come from? I mean, the Americans don't need to find a reason to hate people. Like, Americans are very racist, very self-absorbed, very like, they have a history of colonialism and a history of racism, right? And they are more than a little threatened of Russia, right? That, like, Russia is another superpower, and America doesn't like that. Like, it makes a lot more sense when you just understand that America is like a frothing at the mouth psychopath. Like, once you kind of put that together, that America is just like this kind of crazed Harley Quinn sort of character, that sometimes you look over at America and you're like, ha ha, ha ha, ha ha, and then sometimes you look over at America and you're like, holy fuck, what is happening, right? So once you kind of understand that there's like this bipolar psychosis that America is constantly undergoing, it looks out at the world and it's constantly trying to find threats, and Russia is very threatening because Russia is big, it has a lot of resources, and America is very envious and wants those resources for itself, and it doesn't want other nations to be friends with anybody else. It wants all of the toys for itself, right? So if Russia is standing there being like, oh, we could trade and we could have connections and we could have that kind of thing, it's very threatening to America. Like, it doesn't want rational actors on the world stage connecting with other people. It wants everything for itself. And I think that's the bottom line on it. Like, it wants all the toys, and it doesn't want you to have any toys. Like, it's if you ask me, the Russian error There's an error that I keep seeing in Russian people, and I keep seeing it over and over again, is that Russians tend to give Americans and Westerners generally more credit than they're due. That Russians consistently, whenever I observe the historical interactions between Russians and Westerners, Russians, and this includes Stalin, this includes all of your leaders, like Peter the Great. They always seem to look over at the West and go, well, certainly they must be rational. Well, certainly they must care about their children. Well, certainly they're not going to do this thing that's obviously going to blow up in their faces and cause problems for everyone. Certainly they're not that crazy. And over and over and over again, the answer is, yeah, they are. Yeah, they are. Yeah, they are. Yeah, they are. And if I really was to say, if I had the rapt attention of every Russian in the world, and I could tell them one thing, it would be, stop giving the West any credit. Stop thinking that they're rational people who are going to be there and be like, you're right, that would be a mistake. They're not going to do that. They're rabid dogs who are just running around looking for the next bone. That's all they're doing, and that's all they can do. And when you guys interact with them, and you see these Americans coming at you and talking like this, saying, oh yes, we've got to do all this kind of stuff, you get suckered. Every time. You get suckered into thinking that these guys are anything other than what they are, which is foaming at the mouth psychopaths. That Russia, China, India, the Middle East, Africa, South America all need to come to terms with the hard reality that what you're dealing with is crazed lunacy. And just because it's standing in front of you talking like this, saying something that sounds kind of sensible, doesn't mean it's not fucking crazy. It's crazy, and it's going to destroy you. Always. 100% of the time. It's never going to not destroy you. And the reason for it, very simply, is that could be ours. That could be ours. The thing they have, we could have it. That could be us. We could have that. That mind could be our mind. That field could be my field. And it really is that simple. So please, for the love of God, stop negotiating with Westerners as if Westerners are going to keep their word, follow through on their promises, as if they're going to do what they say. They're not going to do any of that ever. They're not going to do any of that ever. Right? And I don't know how many times Russia needs to learn that lesson. I don't know how many times Russia needs to learn this lesson. Do you have to have a city nuked before you actually learn this lesson? That America will never follow through on its promises. That Europe will never follow through on its promises. Right? That there was a moment in history where Stalin and Hitler made a pact and said, okay, no, we're good. Right? How'd that work out? How'd that work out? Stop believing these people. Straight up. Stop believing. Don't listen to the West. Stop believing us. We're very untrustworthy. Very untrustworthy. Transylvanian, in that sense that the label creationist doesn't really apply, because creationism is just a denial of the reality of evolution by natural selection, something that we had not yet understood at the time. I mean, I feel like creationists are constantly trying to explain away the evolutionary process. And one of the things I don't mind about the creationists, and anytime I kind of dip in, that they are always trying to ask questions, and they are always trying to push the discourse, that they are also looking for clarity. I think that that's something that's true, and they're not just willing to take things at face value. This is sort of an odd thing that happens in the discourse often. From especially the atheist or agnostic side, is that Galileo should be able to stand up and make a statement, and it should just have been uncritically accepted instantly. Like, probably not, dude. Like, probably not, right? Like, we should be critical of when people stand up and make proclamations about how the world works. And it makes sense that people would be critical of these sorts of discoveries and things like that. That should take time. That it should take time. That it should be vetted, and it should be we should be critical of it, right? You know, we shouldn't just be like that. We shouldn't just accept these things. But anyway, Outlaw Barber, good to see you, Outlaw Barber. There is a creator, the God of Spinoza, the God of the Bible. Definitely not the creator of the universe. Also, I cut hair without a license again today. Become ungovernable. Good for you, Outlaw Barber. Good for you, bud. I hope you walk around with spurs. Fuck it. Christ is Lord. Let's fix this leaky faucet. Cotton. I love it, dude. I love it. No, that guy. Like, when I talk about the atheist stuff, I tend to think of the New Atheists. That's what I really get into with the, because I was really heavily involved and spent a lot of time. I think I probably watched every single debate that Dawkins and Hitchens and Harris had during that period of time. I think I watched literally every single debate that they had. And so when I get, and those debates are still quite influential, that there still is a lot of roots to that period of time, to what's called the New Atheists, right? That's Dawkins, Hitchens, Harris, and Dennett. Dennett I always liked the best because Dennett kept things sharp. Hitchens I respected because Hitchens, I think, really put his money where his mouth was, that he believed what he was saying, and there was one moment where Hitchens, he made the argument, because at the time the war on terror was existing and we were waterboarding people, and Hitchens made the argument that waterboarding isn't torture. And so people said to him, well, then why don't you get waterboarded if it's not torture? And Hitchens said, fine, I will. And he went and he got waterboarded on TV, on camera. He filmed it and released it. He lasted 5 seconds and then immediately changed his tune. So here's a guy who had a position, was confronted with evidence very sharply, put his money where his mouth was, and you can't hate a guy for that, right? You can't hate a guy for that. Like, you can't, just because you don't agree with what somebody is saying doesn't mean that you can't respect who that person is and where they're coming from. And that's more or less how I think about Hitchens. Like, I don't really agree with a lot of what he has to say, and I would consider him sort of something of a foil to a lot of the positions that I hold. But at the same time, like, I think that he was speaking from a place of his own understanding of truth, and you gotta respect that. Dawkins, I think, had a very sort of materialistic scientific perspective, and more or less was lampooning the giant spaghetti monster sort of position. So I think that Dawkins sort of fades out of the conversation more and more over time as people begin to actually understand what theology is actually saying. And then Harris was always a fraud. Like, read Letter to a Christian Nation, dude. Like, this guy's an Islamophobic, like, pro-terror, pro-nuclear first strike, pro-torture. His pro-torture position was absolutely crazy, if you ask me. And the fact that Harris is still around is just wild. Like, it's just absolutely wild to me that people still listen to this guy and still take this guy seriously. Like, it's just proof positive that all you got to do is stand there and say, like, oh, you just got to talk like this and say whatever it is you want to say, and you can sound like a rational person even as you say the most Islamophobic shit that anyone has ever said. Like, Harris, some of the stuff that Harris wrote about Muslims in Letter to a Christian Nation would make the Confederates blush about the racism. Like, it's like Song of the South type shit. It's like minstrel show level stuff that Harris writes in Letter to a Christian Nation. And so it's wild to me that people still tolerate this guy and take this guy seriously, when he's, like, very obviously a brutal, psychopathic racist Like, incredibly high level, like at the top of the game. But so that's what I'm directing that at, that guy. I hope you didn't think it was personal, because that's not what I intend to do. Napoleon even once said, scratch the Russians, underneath you'll find the Tatars. Interesting. From what I understand, anti-Russian sentiments go way back, even in the 1500s. Europeans viewed you guys as Mongols and not Europeans. Yeah. They're classic racism, right? Just classic, like they're not us. Capitalism or barbarism, unbelievable. Like the high level delusion is out there. But the world is literally warming. We're heading towards World War III. It's all in the system of capitalism. But yeah, we got to do capitalism harder. That's the solution. That's the solution, guys. We just need to do more capitalism, right? Sure, a train car of chemicals exploded in a huge, gigantic Chernobyl-level event in Ohio, but we just got to do more capitalism. That's what we need to do. Just absolutely outrageous. The level of barbarism, like the detachment from reality is absolutely incredible to watch. It's absolutely incredible to watch. 2,000 years of Christianity, 300 years of capitalism. Take a look at the state of the world, teetering on the edge of oblivion. We need new influences. Yeah. I mean, and they're here in the West, like, outside of the Christian fascists, like, Christianity is becoming very, like, a non-relevant force. Like, it really is just, like, this last vestige of fascism that's seized hold of Christianity. That's trying to grind it out, right? Just trying to grind it into the earth. America is the bully in the playground. Yeah, America is used to give orders, doesn't like anyone challenging them. Yeah. I'm married to an Australian, says Mr. Moon. We moved to Australia. Both agree the USA is a mess. Yeah. Healthcare, guns, no holidays, low wages. Yeah. It's a country that's actively trying to tear itself apart, right? It's actively trying to tear itself apart. And the people who are defending it have become demented. Like, they've just stopped connecting to anything that even remotely looks like reality. Like, just, it's getting wilder and wilder and wilder as time moves forward. The West's hatred of Russia goes all the way back to the schism between the Catholic and the Orthodox churches. Nice reference. The hatred of the British for Russia is even more intense than the baseline hate for the Western Europeans have, and goes back to the Crimean War. And the Americans' hatred tops even that, because Russia was the heart of global communism, and American imperialism's biggest obstacle for 80 years. All in all, there seems to exist a sort of generational psychosis among Westerners when it comes to Russia that goes back a very long time. Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't hurt that Americans don't know anything about the world, right? Like, that Americans are so heavily isolated and so heavily propagandized that they don't really know anything about the world. And so it's easier to be scared of things when you don't know anything about them, right? Like, that ignorance breeds fear, right? That kind of thinking. And most Americans don't know anything about Russia, right? Like, they don't understand the history of Russia. They certainly don't know anything about the history of communism, right? So it's easier to be afraid of places when you don't know anything about them. Young Earth creationists aren't adding anything to the discourse. They shit on science and argue dishonestly. I think that's true. Like, I'm not very impressed with, like, a big reason why I want to do what I am doing. A big reason why I want to be in the discourse is because I find myself constantly saying, like, I don't agree with the atheists and I don't agree with the theists. I think that there's a third rail. I think there's a third way to think about the world. I think there's a different way that isn't these two poles that sort of rely on each other, right? And the reason why it's frustrating to get into that discourse is because the well has been so poisoned. That the atheists believe in the spaghetti monster and the creationists refuse to engage in the real scientific discourse, and nobody actually wants to read what any of the theologians wrote, and none of them are actually reading the Bible at all, or any of this, like, any of this stuff, right? This is what's so crazy, is that you really are ending up with a discourse amongst the most illiterate. And the whole conversation seems to have just been ceded to that nobody actually cares about these writers. Nobody actually cares about the texts. Nobody actually cares about any of this kind of stuff. And if you don't care about it, and you're not willing to read it or talk about it, then you can basically say what you like. And they do. Right? And they do. Everybody just kind of says what they like, and it's not really rooted in anything. So I'm trying to pull it back into the actual conversations that people like Newton were having, right? Like, what is this reality? Why are we here? And the question that I find myself that's the most effective to ask isn't a question like, does God exist? But rather is to just accept fully that the scientific perspective of the world is probably the most accurate we have, and to then ask a question of, okay, well, is there an underlying consciousness? Is there an underlying consciousness to all of this? And is there a life? Is this alive? Are we part of are we a collective entity, or are we not a collective entity? That our illusionary perspective of what's going on, it augments this sort of hyper-individualist mindset that we live in. Like, we live in a very hyper-individualist mindset. We worship the individual and we worship the self. And so the only way that you can do that is by full denial that we are part of a collective system, that we are more akin to like red blood cells, right? But imagine if red blood cells started to argue that they were the most important thing as individuals, that the individual blood cell was the thing that mattered the most. Like, it's kind of what I think of when I think of getting into this conversation, because it's like it's we fooled ourselves, like that we are part of a collective system, and that system is itself a form of consciousness, and it is itself attempting to discover its own self, that we are the voice of creation, and we are attempting to understand ourselves, not just ourselves as individuals, but ourselves as part of a collective total, that we are attempting to articulate something else. And instead of doing that, we're all just like playing Xboxes and jerking off, essentially. Like, that's what's wild. Like, we could be having really cool conversations. We could be having like really, really cool conversations, but instead of that, all of our conversations are about who gets to shoot rockets and who gets to live in houses, and like, I earned it. Like, this kind of dumb, banal, really low-level shit. Instead of asking, like, what is the nature of reality? Why is there something other than nothing? What is the purpose of our existence? What is the purpose of, is there such a thing as purpose? If there is no such thing as purpose, then isn't what we do the only thing that really matters? The impulses that are part of your consciousness, shouldn't those be taken into account? Shouldn't we have serious discussions about, isn't it interesting how randomly generated people come in with ideas and thoughts about how they want to interact with the world and what they want to do? Isn't that interesting? Should we foster that idea? But instead of that, everything is just ground into this system of capital. And so the only people who are allowed to have opinions are the people who own everything. And so it's this great bottlenecking that happens, where the only ideas that matter are the ideas that make money for like 1,000 people. And so no wonder the whole thing's in free fall. Yeah, I know, right? The Ronnie McNutt stuff, dude. I'm with you on this one, bud. I'm pretty impressed by it. I love this. Just tell me you don't know anything about Russia and China, dude. Well, Russia and China proved that communism was a death cult, even though they improved literacy rates. Everyone got housed. They have universal healthcare systems. Like, you just don't know anything about the subject. It's just crazy. You know what's ironic? The New Atheists had this Christo-fascism tacked down, yeah? Despite the New Atheist victories, it didn't really do much. It proved that the Evangelicals weren't honest ever. Yeah, that's true. Like, that's something you can't take away from the New Atheists. And Chris Hedges' book on New Atheists is awesome. You're right about that. But the New Atheists went after the Christian fascists, but because they don't really understand the subject, they tended to see the Christian fascists as all of Christianity, right? And really what the New Atheists sort of highlight is the weakness of the Christian left, which makes sense given that if you stood up and were actually a voice on the left in Christianity, then you got shot. right? Like, they shot Fred Hampton, they shot Martin Luther King, they shot Malcolm X, right? Like, well, why aren't there any Christian voices on the left? Because they get shot, right? Real simple. Dragonfruit says, I could have dual citizenship to the UK, but that place is a shit show too. Yeah. Well, and the UK is actually, like, people are in the streets in the UK. Like, what's happening in Europe is going to begin developing here. And so getting, I pay attention to what's going on in the UK and France especially. Like, France is really well developed. People are essentially living in the streets in France. It seems pretty unlikely that it's not going to happen here. It also proved that the Evangelicals has a huge streak of patience to get what they want. Yeah, it's a huge problem. Well, religious-minded people who have a religious mindset, do see things in longer terms, right? That at least evangelicals and religious people have a historical view. Even though that historical view is usually like magic is real and there was a wizard who came around, that kind of thing. But they are at least thinking about the past. And they are at least thinking about the future. Even though when they think about the future, they think about the moment of their death and how they're going to go meet Jesus Christ, right? But that puts them heads and shoulders above capitalists who do not think about the past at all. The past is dead. Like, literally what happened past this moment is gone forever. It doesn't matter. And you can see that manifesting in the way that capitalists talk about, well, slavery was forever ago. Just get over it. Right? So the past doesn't exist if you're a capitalist. And they certainly don't think about the future, right? That they think in at most 4-month increments. Like, just how do I make that line go up today is really what these capitalists are all about. And whereas, like, religious people, yeah, they have a longer view. And they're fascists, so that longer view is how do we get rid of the gays, but it is a huge problem. And it's not difficult to play the long game in a system like capitalism, right? It's not difficult. Like, you just need to have a group of people who are willing to wait. And given that the system of capital abhors that, right? Handsome Boy says, yes, I agree with you. Putin is still looking for some kind of wisdom in them that does not exist. Yeah, I think that that's right. And whenever I listen, I follow, there's a channel on TickTock that's called The Putin Perspective. And it just puts up like random snippets of Vladimir Putin. And I rather enjoy it because you really can see that Putin's idea of the West has developed over time. And that he held one position when he was younger, and now that he's older, he holds a different position. But he still is always trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. And he should stop. Like, he should really stop. Like, the West does not deserve the benefit of the doubt. The West has lost that privilege to have the benefit of the doubt. Well, we won't bend to communism, so see you on the battlefield. Yeah, you're not a fascist. Like, hey guys, we should house people peacefully. We should all get together and talk about how bad. See you on the battlefield! Yeah, one of us is a Nazi, dude. Like, the thing that's crazy about these modern day fascists is that they don't really seem to get that they're fascists. Like, it's that, there's this great sketch. From David Webb, where it's two neo-Nazis in the trenches of World War II, dressed in neo-Nazi paraphernalia, and one of them looks at the other and goes, do you think we're the baddies? You know, what? Well, do you think that maybe we're the bad guys? Well, what do you mean we're the bad guys? We're fighting for the glory of Germany. Well, have you noticed that we're wearing an awful lot of skulls? And isn't our slogan, death to the Jews? Don't you find that to be a bit odd? And it's really highlighting something a phenomenon that I think is true in the society, is that, like, people will threaten death to people. Like, people will say these things and then just be like, yeah, I'm a good person because I'm afraid of people who want to make sure that there are no homeless people. Like, my core message, the core thing that I hope everybody takes away from what I say is everyone should have food and shelter. Like, if somebody gave me a wand and said, magically change one thing in the world, I would ensure that everyone had access to food and shelter, no questions, no debate, but what if, no, forget it, no, it's over. Everyone has access to food and shelter. It's done. But if you're a fascist, you hate that. Because the whole goal of fascism is to oppress other people. That's the whole goal of fascism, is to ensure that other people are suffering. That's the whole point. And to find a reason to justify that suffering. Because you're a fascist, and that's what fascists do. And it's very telling that when somebody stands up and says, everyone should have food and shelter, you get comments like, see you on the battlefield, or when are you moving to China, right? Like, it's pretty obvious that we're dealing with a rising fascist mindset that obviously wants to, like, forcibly relocate people they disagree with, that is fine with people killing themselves, is fine with all of that. And it's just wild to live in a world where these people think they're the good guys. Like, that's the crazy part, is that these people think that they're the good guys, while somebody is actually saying out loud and with intention, life should be better. Life should also be better for you. Like, that's what's wild, is that we're walking up to these people saying, you should have better wages, you should have a shorter work day, you should have a better quality of life for not only just yourself, but your entire community around yourself. And these people's response to it is, I can't wait to kill you, you commie. Like, we're dealing with a disconnected people. We're dealing with just like a type of hysteria at this point. And there's just no, how do we have a discussion? Like, how can we have a discussion when the response to everyone should have food and shelter is, I can't wait to kill you? Like, it's over then, right? It's over then. That we are dealing with a country that wants to destroy itself and is happy to destroy itself. Like, and I think that's what we're going to see. Like, I think that the United States is going to balkanize, and it's going to destroy itself. And it's going to destroy itself for this reason. That anybody who actually stands up and says, hey, we could actually build a community, we could actually build a society that makes sense for everybody, gets death threats or gets thrown into the streets or gets told to move to a different country. Like, it's just, you can't have a reasonable conversation. And that's sort of on purpose. Handsome Boy is asking, what was the goal? Will we rebel because of the sanctions and go make a revolution and remove the president and put up their puppet? How naive are they? I don't really understand your comment. Sorry, bud. I don't know what it's directed at. Yeah, spirituality is non-rational, not necessarily irrational. Well, that's just it. It is a non-rational. Like, fundamentally, like, spirituality is just an analysis of your existence. It's an analysis of yourself and your analysis of your connection to the rest of the world and to what I kind of jokingly call the light pool, right? That you're not disconnected from things. Like, there is like a spirit force within you. Like, there is an energy that resides within you and that you can connect to and you can have a conversation with, and you can learn something about yourself and what it is you want to be. And it's not irrational, but it's certainly not rational, right? Like, are your bowels rational, right? Is your stomach rational? Is your heart rational? Right? Like, that's a good one to actually discuss when you get into this conversation of non-rational, right? Like, everyone understands that love is not rational. That you are drawn to what you are drawn to, right? Like, you like what you like. And it's not rational. And if somebody had tried to rationalize it and tried to say that it has to be rational, you would think that person is kind of demented, right? Like, you like it because you like it. And it's that simple. That when you find a person in the world that you connect with and that you fall in love with, and that you decide to push your chips in with, and that you're going to fight for, and that you're going to work with, and you're going to move forward with, it's not rational. You're not sitting there like drawing up a pro-con list. Everyone does this. Everyone follows their heart, and everyone moves their chips in the direction that they think makes sense, given what their instincts, if you like, are telling them. And we're demand better, good to see you. And we're fooling ourselves, and we're living in a kind of a state of foolishness if we try to pretend that it's all rational actors acting rationally in a rational world that's exclusively rational, right? Which is basically the death cult of modern day economics, right? Like these death cult priests trying to convince you that well, you are where you are because you made a bad decision in the rational world that's obviously rational, and I made the good decision by being born rich. People don't like that, though, because then they don't have a lower class below them. Yeah, because they're fascists, right? Like if you're rooting for someone else's failure, so that you can point at them and mock them, then you're probably a fascist, right? Yeah, liberals. You know, that Hitler fellow maybe does have a point. Yeah. Dragon fruit. Lower middle class people look at homeless people as like the consequences of not bowing down to the capitalist system, which is a false sentiment, but they still believe it. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's the worship of the individual, right? Like, I talk about the three pillars of the downfall of Western civilization. And once you kind of understand it, you see it everywhere. That the first one is really obvious. It's the worship of money, right? The second one is also pretty obvious, which is the worship of the individual. So in this case, like, that person just needed to work harder. Right, that person just needed to work harder, and which is the worship of the individual. As it's like throwing someone into the middle of the ocean and then saying, "Oh, they just needed to swim harder." That they definitely wouldn't have drowned if they just kept swimming, right? So it's the worship of the individual, and then the final one is the worship of stupidity. I know, the worship of stupidity, though. My question was about sanctions. The West sanctioned us in everything. What was the point of all this sanctions? That we will make a revolution and remove Putin? Yeah, that was that's their idea. But I actually think that their real reason they do sanctions is just to spread cruelty, just to spread suffering, right? Like the West is not acting in a way that is rational, and it ties into what I just said, right? It tied in to what I just said. Tesco, just to be clear, 1/3 of Canadians do not want to forcibly made homeless people. They just want to allow homeless people to commit suicide. That they're saying if you're homeless, the state should open up its doors to suiciding you, which is like a hair's breadth off of that idea. Like, the West is not acting rationally, and it's not interested in acting rationally. That's the thing that I think is most obvious. That occasionally you'll get some voices that attempt to pretend as though they're interested in acting rationally, but those voices usually sound very confused. Like that whenever I see wealthy people or people who are in positions attempting to grapple with what is going on in a way that is rational, they either have turned against the West entirely, because that's the only rational position left, or they're just acting in a way that, or they're really, really struggling. They're really, really struggling. And I don't... Oh, I know, my man. Sorry, guys. This dog is, like, losing his little mind. Pro-capitalist here. Just call yourself a fascist, dude. Just say it. Like, stop pretending. Like, that's the thing that's wild about this conversation. Like, the housing market's exploding, climate change is destroying everything, poverty is spiking, the prison industrial complex is rounding people up. You're pro-capitalist. Just call yourself a fascist, man. Just get to it. So the West is not acting rationally. And to give you a really clear example, handsome boy, is that so like these sanctions, the gas sanctions, and the bombing of the pipeline, the Nord Stream pipeline, right? So what has that achieved for Europe, right? So they cut Europe off from gas through sanctions and the bombing of this pipeline and all this kind of stuff, right? So what's Europe had to do? Well, Europe is now buying its natural gas from India, but India doesn't produce natural gas. So where is India getting its natural gas? Oh, it's getting it from Russia. So the end result of these sanctions and the bombing of this pipeline is that Europe is now spending more for gas. Like, that's what's happening. Like, that's what's happening. And it's crazy. Like, it's crazy. The system of capital has ceased to act rationally, and the rest of the world is acting accordingly, right? The rest of, like, the whole BRICS alliance is 100% an admission that we can no longer rationally negotiate with these people. That it's actually not possible. Are they that naive? I don't think it's like, it's not about naivety. I don't think naive would be the word that I would use. I think that they are desperate. I think that they don't know what to do, that capitalists do not plan, right? That's why I like to use like Harley Quinn as the figure, right? Like it's not that they're sitting there like a Voldemort type character where they're looking at a board and like drawing up plans and then saying, and then this will happen and that will mean this will occur. It's not like they're like a puppet master, you know? It's not like they have like a grand plan that is going to steadily unfold. I think that they're just doing things. And the things that they're doing make a type of sense if you're like a cartoon Harlequin style villain, right? Like, you're not that smart. You're energetic. You've got a lot of motivation. You've got a lot of destructive firepower, right? You know you want to do something, right? And you know that like blowing up pipelines is what you're good at, right? But America has essentially been at war with like defenseless nations since World War II. Their experience with warfare is that of a bully. And they don't actually know how to engage against a superpower. They don't actually understand what warfare and what politics looks like on the world level outside of, we said this and you do what we say. Because that's all they've ever done. And it's always worked, because they're always blowing up nations that don't have a standing army, a navy, or an air force. Right? Well, Russia has a standing army. Russia has an air force. Russia has a navy. Right? Russia has an economy. And it is a powerful superpower on the world stage. And they don't know how to interact with it. They genuinely think blowing up this pipeline will solve the problem. And it doesn't. Right? It's very much just like a desperate ploy. And America is just acting desperately because they don't know what else to do. Because the idea of sitting down and actually having rational conversations and making deals that are win-win is off the table for America. It's never done that. It's never done that. It doesn't know how to do that. Like, it doesn't know how to do diplomacy. This is something that I really think that people need to actually hear and actually take seriously and actually put into their brain space and actually accept and absorb, is that America is incapable. It's chosen on purpose to not understand how to do diplomacy. It refuses to understand anything about the nation that it's actually interacting with. It refuses to negotiate terms. It refuses to actually put anything on the table. It refuses to even state goals, right? It refuses to actually state goals. All it is doing is gallivanting around the world, blowing things up, deposing people they don't like, and they have no long-term plan outside of the type of planning that a rabid dog would have. That he's just roving around, taking people out that have big stacks of food so that they can eat the food themselves. And if they see an obstacle, then that is how they're acting. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is doing something that is extremely foreign to the West, called planning. That the West has been running on a principle of let the free market decide. Well, the free market is deciding. And the free market is saying that the successful nations will be the ones that have a plan. And the nations that do not have a plan, that simply try to bully themselves around the world, will fail. And will continue to fail. And eventually that failure turns internally. That the struggles that are happening on the world stage, that America will fail on the world stage. It will attempt a war against China, and it will fail, because the Chinese are not a pushover. Like, the Chinese are not going to lose. Straight up, they're not going to lose. China has 1.4 billion people. America has 300 million people. The American military itself says 70% of people, if they were drafted, are unfit for service in America. The Chinese are ready for a war. They know how to fight this war. They are prepared. They have shown America several times over now that they are prepared and they are ready and they will fight. And America will lose. It's not a war that America can win or will win. And when that war fails and when America loses, all of those fascists that they've trained to be fascists will come home and rule like fascists do. Like, America is in a significant and severe decline. It is experiencing a massive spiritual crisis, a massive existential crisis. And the rest of the world sees it, the rest of the world understands it, and the rest of the world is acting accordingly. Because America needs to be isolated. It must be isolated. If America is not isolated, it will simply continue to act in the way that it is acting. And it can't be permitted to persist. If we are going to have successful countries in the world, if everything is just not going to be a dystopian wasteland where America is just constantly carpet bombing people, like they carpet bombed Vietnam, like they carpet bombed Cambodia, like they carpet bombed Laos, like they carpet bombed Korea, right? Like, I don't know why Americans think that China shouldn't be prepared, right? Right? Like, American history in living memory is literally carpet bombing Southeast Asian countries. Like, if China goes to war with the U.S., you mean if the U.S. goes to war with China, because China's not going to go to war with the U.S. It's the U.S. that's going to war with China. Are you going to fight for Canada? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. If they were to do a draft, I would go to jail. Like, I'm not going to fight for these Nazis. We are easily the Nazis on the world stage. That if you look at the history of what's going on, and if you actually look at who is the antagonist, who is the defender, who is pushing towards peace, who is pushing towards war, it is easily us that are the Nazis. Easily. And it's not close. Right? It's not like we're looking at two powers that are like, oh, and I'm making that statement where they're like, it's literally like, we're the Nazis, and then, like, hell no, we won't go. Yeah. America said they will bomb Taiwan to the ground if China invades it. I mean, that's sort of the goal, isn't it? Like, what China wants with Taiwan, like, China is a country that's willing to wait. Right? They play long games. Like, America doesn't understand the concept of waiting. America doesn't understand the concept of planning. Like, it doesn't understand these things. Like when America sits down and plans, they make the dumbest. They have the dumbest ideas you could possibly have. Like, what China wants is it just wants tensions to cool, and China hoped that those tensions were going to cool with Nixon. By the way, when Nixon went to China, Everybody understood that Taiwan was part of China. That's what makes this conversation so embarrassing for the Americans, is that everybody understood for decades and decades and decades. The entire international community considers Taiwan to be part of China. That this whole narrative that Taiwan is its own country is well outside the international norm, well outside of it. It is an extraordinary position to take, that Americans just act like it is normal to pretend as though Taiwan is its own country, when what has obviously been happening since Mao is an attempt to normalize relations between, like, if it had been up to Mao, Mao just would have taken the island, but Truman prevented him, right? And since then, there's been a normalizing, a hope to normalize relations. But now that the Americans understand how badly they've botched things for themselves, their only strategy is war. And so they're just coming up with an excuse. They're just coming up for an excuse for it. And I fear that the result of it, I fear that the Taiwanese leadership is falling for it. Like, even as they're looking at the disaster that is Ukraine, even as they are looking at at the disaster of American foreign policy, they seem to be falling for it. And it's going to destroy them. Like, it's going to lead to a war that is going to destroy Taiwan, whether it's the Americans doing it or the Chinese doing it. When what the Chinese obviously want is they want to be left alone to normalize relationships with a part of China that has always been considered part of China. Like, it's this idea that Taiwan is its own independent country. When? At what point? At what time was Taiwan ever considered its own independent country? When? Show me even one moment in history where that's the case. Like, it would be as though I went to Maine, right? Or Manhattan Island, and said, Manhattan Island is its own country. And everybody just started acting that way, as if Manhattan Island is its own country. What are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? When? When was it ever understood by anyone that Taiwan was it was its own country? When was it ever written anywhere by anyone at any time that Taiwan is its own country? And so obviously what we're doing is we're fabricating a war justification. We're propagandizing our own citizens and flooding the airwaves with this propaganda so that everyone will just turn their brains off and go along with it and do another Iraq or another Ukraine. That will just fund, as we always do, far-right radicals. We'll arm far-right radicals, attempt to do coups, attempt to overthrow, attempt to create this conflict, like we always do, in an effort to maintain our prestige and superiority on the world stage, and it'll fail. Just like it always does. Because the goal of American foreign policy isn't to actually nation build, isn't actually to improve the quality of life for Americans, it's to make a couple of people rich. That's it. It's just to make a couple of people a little bit rich. That's all. Yeah, the U.S. is the greatest mass murderer of all time. Another expansion with Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine. Yeah. And they get away with it, so it's not a crime. Yeah, exactly. Like, the found the Soviet loving China, loving commies. You got it, bud. Yep. I think the Soviet Union was a success, and what China is doing is successful. Like, lifting 800 million people out of poverty is a success. Like, it seems to me difficult to argue otherwise. That if you had a bunch of people who are living in poverty and now are not in a very short period of time, you should consider that a success. Yeah, the crimes committed by the U.S. are horrific. Absolutely. Like, and we're looking down the barrel of this gun. Like, we're looking down the barrel of this gun, and we're just sort of told to deal with it. You know? We're just told to sort of deal with it. and that the defenders of capitalism have become completely unhinged. They have no arguments. Like that's the part about it that I think is the most astounding, is that they don't even have arguments anymore. Right? And what they consider to be arguments are embarrassing. Like the capitalism is human nature argument is got to be the most embarrassing thing that is said. That they're starting to actually say at high levels. Like Bill Maher says it now. And it's literally just like, oh, so we should just get rid of laws then, right? Right? Murdering people is part of human nature, right? We should just not have systems to try to get rid of the worst parts of human nature, or to try to deal or to punish or to do something about the worst parts of human nature, right? We should just repeal all of these laws. Right? Humans are selfish and murderous, right? So we should just get rid of these laws, right? It's essentially the argument that they're making, that we should just revert to a form of barbarism. Because barbarism is just human nature, right? And of course the defense then becomes, oh no, we should keep the laws that benefit me, right? We should keep the laws that make it so that I benefit, obviously. But laws that would benefit anyone else, no. Those are against human nature. So it's just we're in a very unserious period of time. And you can tell that we're in an extremely unserious period of time because people are turning to comedians. People are turning to comedians to get their perspective of the world. People are actually giving a shit about what comedians have to say about what's going on in terms of world politics. That I think Jon Stewart actually said it best. Is that it's not that the comedians are elevating, it's that the rest of the discourse is degrading so badly that comedians are beginning to sound like they make sense. And like, how do we live in a world like this? How do we continue to persist in a world that's no longer interested in having a reasonable and rational conversation about how to solve its problems? That those people who call themselves capitalists and who say that they're pro-capitalist are obviously disinterested in acknowledging the seriousness of the problem and acknowledging that something needs to be done about it. And it's difficult to live in a society that is abandoning itself so thoroughly and to watch itself tear itself apart. And it will tear itself apart. Like, the balkanization of America will happen very swiftly. It'll happen a lot faster than people think. And once the dollar drops, once the value of the dollar drops, because the rest of the world is going to stop trading in it, Americans are going to be totally screwed. Like, Americans are going to lose access to basic goods, like things that you take for granted. Go take a look at the things that are in your house right now, and take a look at the back of your packages. See how many times they say made in Vietnam, made in China, made in a Southeast Asian country. Well, all of that's gone. All of that's gone. Or if you do get it, it's going to be a lot more expensive. Because the value of your dollar is going to plummet. And it's going to plummet swiftly. In big and serious ways. When do I think the balkanization will happen? I mean, I can't give you a day-for-day timeline, obviously. Like, that's not a thing that I'm capable of doing. But the process of balkanization is going to look real simple, right? It's going to be real straightforward. Is that you're going to have wealthy billionaires who are going to be told by the government. Actually, let me start at the real beginning of it. BRICS, that's China, Brazil, Russia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, are getting together and they're beginning to trade off of the dollar. And they're continuing to trade off of the dollar. And the entire American economy is based on the idea that the rest of the world must trade on the American dollar. And the rest of the world is no longer going to do that. And so this is going to plummet the value of the dollar significantly, very quickly. And Americans don't make anything. They don't manufacture anything. They don't make their own goods. They trade their dollars for goods. but those dollars are no longer going to be able to buy anything, right? That they're no longer going to be able to buy anything. And the American dollar is going to go into a plummet. It's going to drop pretty quickly. And what that means is that America is going to have a whole bunch of bills to pay that it's not going to be able to pay, and it's going to turn to its billionaire class. The federal government is going to turn to its billionaire class and say, okay, we've got to tax you. Biden has already begun this process. It's already begun this process, and the billionaires are going to begin funding and fomenting independence movements, right? It's not difficult to see someone like Elon Musk, who lives in Texas, saying, why are we paying money to this federal government? And to see a bunch of Texas workers going, yeah, why are we spending money? Why are we funding this? We should just secede, right? We should just secede. And it's not difficult to see a place like California doing that. And it's not difficult to see, especially if somebody like Donald Trump wins again, right? And I want to be really clear about something, that the balkanization of the United States is the most likely outcome. It's the most likely outcome. That if you take a look at history and the history of empire, well, the most likely thing to happen is that the empire balkanizes. That happened to the Roman Empire, happened to the British Empire, happened to all of the Chinese empires that existed, right? And it's pretty unlikely. Like, if you're sitting there saying that no, America will stay together, well, you're the one that needs to provide the evidence of how that's going to happen, how that's going to work. Because the most likely thing that's going to happen is that the United States balkanizes. That's the most likely thing that's going to happen. Yeah, the U.S. will just split up into separate countries. That's balkanization for you. That's what it is. And, I mean, I think that initially it'll be states. So you'll have, like, Texas and California are the big ones breaking off. And from there, it's like a big question mark about the validity of the American federal government. Like, what validity does the American federal government actually have? Handsome Boy says, I think we need at the moment, like Stalin, I think that Putin is very soft and not punishing the West enough for them to land and take off the crown. If there was somebody like Stalin, it would be completely different. I think that Putin is a really interesting figure, though. Because I think that Putin, like, the narrative that happened post-World War II and post-Stalin was really, we want to integrate with the West. That's if I wanted to be nice, right? Like, if I take off the communism hat and I just put on the human hat and I look at these guys like they're people, I can really understand why these guys no longer wanted to pursue the idea of communism. Because the idea of communism was isolating them. It was isolating them in the world. It was creating enemies for them. And they didn't have any allies. The Sino-Soviet split had already happened. And so I think that a lot of these guys, Khrushchev and Brezhnev and Gorbachev and Yeltsin, were really interested in how do we integrate ourselves with the West. If we can get integrated into the Western system, if we can get integrated into the IMF, if we can get integrated into these systems, then we no longer need to fear war. Germany is the country that attacked us. Germany is the country that attacked us. And if we can get integrated into these systems, then we can avoid being attacked again. 25 million people died in World War II. That's a scar that Russia bears. That's a scar that they bear. And they don't want it to happen again. Russians don't want it to happen again. And I could really respect that. And so they're looking at communism and thinking to themselves, let's just get rid of this communism thing. Let's move into Western thinking and Western ideas and Western, and we'll integrate ourselves. We'll become part of the IMF. We'll become part of the G7. We'll become part of NATO even. NATO, an organization that exists to destroy the Soviet Union, right? Which Germany is a member of, which is extremely threatening to Russia, for sure. And Putin is the guy who comes into power with the hope and the belief that he's going to stick the landing. That all of the work that's been done by Gorbachev and by Yeltsin and by Brezhnev and by Khrushchev and these guys, all of that work that's been done, all of that foundational work that's been done, well, Putin's the guy that's coming in to stick this landing and to say, okay, we are going to be part of the West. And for a time, it looked like it might happen. That Putin was part of what was called the G8, right? And is now the G7. But very steadily through his career, I think Putin came to understand that Russia was never going to be integrated. And there's lots of moments that you can point to, but the one that I like to point to that I think is the strongest is that when Russia applied for NATO membership and was rejected, that Putin's position, and I think the position of Russia generally, was like, okay, well, if you're going to expand towards us, and if the problem that we're having is NATO expansion towards us, well, why don't we just become NATO members? And then that's not an expansion towards us, it's rather a filling in. And then the rejection, I think, was a big moment when Putin realized, okay, we are never going to be integrated into the West. The plans of Gorbachev and Yeltsin and these guys are never going to come into fruition. Russia is going to have to find its own path away from the West. And so Putin begins a pivot. He begins a pivot away from the West towards China and towards Southeast Asia generally, India and these places. And the Syrian war was a big moment. The Libyan war was a big moment for Putin, I think, where he came to realize that what he was dealing with was just a crazed lunatic group that were looking more and more Hitlerian as time moved forward. And and then finally the Ukrainian war is the moment where Putin begrudgingly has to put the nail in the coffin. And the Ukraine war is an important war for relations between Russia and America and also for Putin, because it's the moment when Putin and Russia realize that they can or accept or declare, maybe is the best word to use. It's the moment when Putin and Russia declare to the entire world that Russia will never be part of the West. It will never be integrated, that it must push itself into a different direction, and it is. And so Putin is a crucial figure in Russian history. He's a crucial figure in Russian history. He's a pivot point in Russian history. And I think that his legacy is going to be that pivot. And the Ukraine war is going to be what people discuss the most about Putin. But I think the lead up to the Ukraine war, starting from the beginning of his leadership to the end of it, is Putin's entire story is actually quite fascinating. What happens after Putin is what's going to be very interesting. That eventually Putin leaves. Eventually Putin goes and a new leader takes over. Who's that leader? I suspect there will be some leader that comes in and then leaves pretty quickly. That's usually how these things go. That the first person that comes up is like, hey, we're just going to keep doing what Putin was doing. And people are going to be like, nah. And we'll see. We'll see who the next guy is. We'll see who the next guy is. Because I think that what Putin is doing is essentially trying to get connected to BRICS and get connected to China and get a good trade network going. And I think that Putin gets given a lot of different isms, a lot of different names. Imperialist, czarist, capitalist. Some people even say he's a communist, right? Like there's a lot of ists and isms that get thrown towards Putin. And I think that what history will bear out is that what Putin really was a Russian. That I think that he was always and is always just making the best decision he feels for the Russian people, to the best of his abilities. I don't think that he has a big ethos. I don't think he has a big philosophy Like, I don't think that there's going to be like a Maoism. I don't think there's going to be Maoist thought or Dangist thought. There's not going to be Putin thought. You know, that there's not going to be Putinism. Like, that's not going to be a thing. That I think Putin is basically a wheeler and dealer, a businessman. His hope was that he was going to put his hand on the rudder of history and it was going to shoot him straight forward. And he just had to do what he had to do, given the circumstances that he was given. And I actually think history is going to be pretty kind to Putin. That I think his hope was for peace and he didn't get it. I think that's really the truth about him, is that his hope was for peace and he just didn't get it. Which I think is very sad, a very sad reality about him. Like, I don't think he wanted to go to war. I don't think he wanted to go to war in Syria. I don't think he wanted to go to war in Georgia. I don't think he wants to be at war in Ukraine. I don't think he wants any of this. I don't think he wants these crises to be happening. It's just he's the guy. He's the guy in the position. That if it was up to him, he would be a member of the G20, he'd be a member of the G7, he'd be a member of NATO, and he'd be sailing on a sailboat, shirt off, right? He'd be riding his horse, right, around in the wilderness. But that's not what history gave him. History gave him a different narrative. And I think the people who will look the most kooky when it comes to looking back at Putin will be the people who tried to compare him to Hitler. I think those people will look like absolute nut jobs. But we'll see how time unfolds. Cotton says, about balkanization. Apparently we are over half the states in the U.S. who are ready to do an actual constitutional convention. Yeah. Apparently we need like 70% of the states to agree to convention. Yeah. I mean, that would be amazing, actually. Like, if the United States suddenly did do a constitutional convention, that would actually be incredible. That could actually save the Union. Like, that's what's interesting. It's like a constitutional convention where everybody sort of sees something serious happen and is seen to be done for the benefit of the people, could actually reinvigorate the Union. But it's going to take something like that. It's going to take some kind of large project, right? Like, you can't keep these sorts of unions alive. You can't keep a country going without some kind of justification, without some kind of project, without something. Yeah, they could literally rewrite the entire Constitution. Yeah, it's true. Montana banned TickTock. No kidding, eh? I wish Russia had a hardcore Stalinist right now for real. I mean, we'll see, dude. Like, we'll see. When Putin goes, like, it's... You never really know what's going on behind the scenes. You never really know what's happening inside the parliament chambers. Yeah, Tesco, how do you know this? What can I Google to look into this? I'd like to look into that myself, Cotton. What should we look up? What, as a warmongering tyrant? Imagine believing that Putin is a warmongering tyrant, right? Like, what's Putin actually done? Right? Like, especially when you compare it, like, it's rich that Westerners would say such a thing. That's what's rich, right? Like, it's rich that Westerners stand up and point a finger at someone like Putin and try to call him a warmongering tyrant, while literally we're in, what, like year 22 of the quote-unquote war on terror. We've bombed, we've invaded Afghanistan, Iraq, all of this without justification. Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, Ethiopia, Yemen. There's literally a genocide going on in Yemen because of us. Not to mention the Palestinian genocide that's going on because of us. We've committed coup after coup after coup throughout Latin America and Africa. Syria, Libya. Libya is the greatest atrocity of our generation, without a doubt. The destruction of Libya should be considered on the same level as anything that Adolf Hitler ever did. that Libya was the wealthiest country on the African continent. It had done things like eradicate homelessness in its borders. It had raised the literacy rate. It had raised education rates. It had lifted people out of poverty. It was moving towards creating an African Union. And the Americans destroyed it. And now there is an ongoing war in Libya constantly, internally, fueled, of course, by American interests and by America, with open slave trade in Libya. And you get great quotes, like someone like Hillary Clinton saying, "We came, we saw, he died." Ha 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 ha, laughing and cackling like a psychopath, right? So this this idea that Westerners can stand up and actually say out loud to anyone with any credibility, what you're doing is wrong. Like, who cares what you think? Like, really, who cares what you think? It's pretty ridiculous, frankly. Like, so much of the reason why I do this is to kind of grapple. Like, it was nice to take a break, but it was nice to take a break with the and to have a bit of a vacation. But like, the truth is that I think it's good to talk about like living in this extraordinarily gaslit society. I think that's the weirdest part about it. Like, the weirdest part about what is happening in the society is not that it's doing bad things. It's not that it's acting in a way that is foolish. It's the delusion. It's the absolute overwhelming gaslighting that is fairly obviously happening. That people genuinely think that a society that has been in wars of aggression, without justification whatsoever, for at least 20 years. But then when you look at the history, you can see that it's pretty constant since World War II, that the country that's been launching the wars of aggression are actually the good guys. That's the crazy part. That's the crazy part. It's that there is no justification for these wars, and the justification that comes out of people's mouths is usually something like, we've got to defend our freedom. Just the most incredibly delusional shit you've ever heard in your life. Straight up just religious ideology shit. And like, I keep finding myself asking the same question, right? How do we actually have a meaningful conversation? How do we even engage in a meaningful conversation with people who refuse to acknowledge the existence of reality? And that to me is going to be the painful part about it. Is that, like, one of the things I think about a lot is the overturning of Roe v. Wade. That you had people who swept into power and who overturned Roe v. Wade. This kind of comment, for example. It is socialism destroying the world, which is bringing communism. Wake up, bud, you're lost. Like, literally America has been destroying the entire planet for 70 years. Like, Hitler was a capitalist. Like, Hitler was a capitalist. And World War II was a capitalist war. Like, I just like, where are these socialist countries you're talking about? Like, America is not the only one causing problems. Okay, who else is causing problems? Who else is causing problems? I cannot believe people talk about Ronnie McNutt still, dude. What a legacy. What a champion. I literally had no idea who this was. Russia defending itself against American imperialism, China defending itself against American imperialism, Iran defending itself against American imperialism. Next. China Uyghurs. So fucking embarrassing. What I love about the China Uyghur narrative is how Americans pretend like they care about Muslims. That's my favorite. Like this absolute false giving a crap about Muslims. Unbelievable. Like just the audacity it takes. Just the cojones. You really got to admire it. Right? You got to admire the cojones of a person who lives in a country that has been actively purging Muslims with the Muslim ban, who has actively been destroying Muslim nations, actually trying to convince people that they actually do genuinely care about Muslims. Like it's pretty crazy. Like it's pretty crazy. Yeah, better dead than red. Just call yourself a fascist, bud. Get to it. Thoughts on the war in Ukraine? I oftentimes get my channel banned for talking about that, but I mean you can find out pretty quick. Like, if you actually stop listening to American propaganda and start listening to what most of the rest of the world has to say about it, it's pretty clear that America just did what America always does, right? Foment a war and a coup, which happened in 2014. China harvests Uyghur organs. Like, this is some flat Earth shit, dude. Like that's what's wild about this. Like there's just like literally no evidence, and anytime you try to find any evidence, it's straight up a CIA source. Like just straight up, just like if you uncritically believe what the CIA has to say, you'll believe anything. What do I think America should do? America should stop doing anything. America should go home. America should go into a field and stare at the sky. That's what Americans should do. Every single American should literally walk out of the workplaces that they live in, should walk out of their jobs, should walk out of everyone, lie in a field and stare at the sky. The world would be better off. The world would be a better place if every American just stopped participating in the world outside of just looking at the sky, drinking the water, eating the food, and then just stop trying to pretend like you can go stop pretending like you can just go around the world exerting your authority everywhere because you're America. Right? Like, it's this kind of stuff, right? Like, this isn't an argument. It's just embarrassing for you. It's just a way to dehumanize people and dismiss them. Like, you're not participating, right? And if you think that this is participation, right? If you think that this is participation, then there's a reason why everything's collapsing. Because, like, if this is the way it's going to be, like, how do we have a genuine discussion about things? I thought America gave other poor countries a chance to get out of poverty with trading. If you want to see how false that is, bud, just listen to what those countries have to say about America. Just straight up. Just go find what the wealthy, not the wealthy, go find out what the presidents and the leadership of countries like Kenya, like Zimbabwe, like Libya, like South Africa, like, go listen to what they have to say about America. They're not walking around talking about how great America is. They're not walking around saying how, oh, it's so great that Americans came in. Right? China harvests citizens' organs. Just embarrassing. Just embarrassing, dude. Like, this kind of stuff, like, it's grow up time, man. Like, if you're falling for this, there's just nothing you won't fall for. Like, yeah, we truly care about the human rights of Muslims in China, you guys. It's not like we had a huge Islamophobic hysteria after 9/11 and been bombing the Middle East forever or nothing, right? Cotton says, oh, want to hear something rich? The CPI, who is Maupin's organization, talked about solidarity with the Uru movement. Couldn't think of any groups more than actual at odds with their goals. I don't know anything about the Uru movement. I don't really listen that much to Maupin anymore, honestly. Like, I found that the scandal he got embroiled in to be quite what's a good word for it? The scandal that Maupin got himself involved in, like, it's I don't know that you walk back from that. Like, I really don't know that you walk back from that. Like, I have real questions about his intentions. I've got real questions about what this guy's trying to achieve. Just calling out hypocrisy? But Slava Ukraini is literally Nazi slogan. I heard they forced him to eat pork. Do you know anything about that? I mean, chances are extremely good, dude, that you're getting your information from sources like Radio Free Asia, right? Like, this is what the CIA does, is that they find a source like yeah, exactly. They get Radio Free Asia or Radio Free Europe, which is their source, CIA, to report on something, and it's a lie. And then they get other more reputable news stations to actually report using that source. And then they spread it around in a circle until finally they get, like, the Wall Street Journal to report it. And the Wall Street Journal will refer to this, which refers to this, which refers to this, which refers to Radio Free Asia. And that's the way that they do it. Can you say that Canada is doing good right now? Absolutely not. No. Canada is basically just America's little brother. That Canada's position on the world stage is essentially, well, at least the Americans aren't bombing us. That's essentially how we work. And when America comes and tells us to do something, we say, yes, sir. That's how we operate. That's how we operate. No, Vosh is an FBI informant. He literally confessed to it on a stream. Like, if you're actually using Vosh as a source and as a resource, then you are at the bottom, my man. You still haven't replied to me saying Al Jazeera is a non-biased source, saying Uyghurs are mistreated. I mean, there is a refugee crisis happening in that region. That's what's going on, right? And there's obviously a crisis going on in that region, because when the Afghanistan war happens, right, like, China and Afghanistan share a border with one another, and you have the East Turkmenic independence movement, which is a terrorist organization that their goal is to force independence of Xinjiang. They want the Xinjiang region to be independent from China. And they'll literally, like, go into the transit system and massacre people with machetes and stuff. Like, that's what they're doing in that region. And so, of course, this is creating a lot of strife, right? It forces China to become more militant in the region. It forces China to react to a terrorist organization. It forces a response, right? And these sorts of responses are not clean. It's not clean. It's not. You're not gonna have, like, a fight against a terrorist organization that's gonna look good. And what the Americans do, and what and all Al Jazeera has done, is say. All Al Jazeera has done is say, oh, look, there's strife going on, and there are Uyghurs saying that there's a difficulty. Yeah, there's, like, literally a war on their border. There's a refugee crisis on their border that nobody talks about. Like, nobody's supposed to actually point out that there's a refugee crisis, right? Do I support Trudeau's immigration rules? No, I don't really support Trudeau. Like, I think Trudeau's basically reads cue cards for the corporate state. Conton says, the Uhuru movement is basically white folks working in solidarity towards African liberation and self-determination. They work under the APSP, last I checked. The CPI was pro-America. Okay. I don't, like, Africa should have liberation and self-determination. Like, sorry, Conton. Like, I know that you want me to connect to this, but I don't really have much to say about it, I don't think. You know? Like, I don't really follow Moppin that much anymore, and I don't really know the organization you're talking about. Yeah, Thomas Sankara, the hero, absolutely. What's better, Stalinism or Maoism? I think that's a bad question to ask. I think that you shouldn't be looking for an ism. I think that you should read the works of Stalin and understand when they were written and who they were written for. And I think that you should read the works of Mao and do the same. And you can learn something from both of them. And you can learn something from everybody. You can learn something from Trotsky. You can learn something from everybody, right? But if you fall for an ism, if you fall into an ism, then you'll find yourself constantly in a position of defending things that you don't really want to be defending. And defending positions that you don't have to. You don't have to. Like, the Stalin and Mao were not gods. They weren't kings. Like, they were men. They were men. And they should be treated as such. What party did I vote for in the recent Canadian election? I vote Communist. Oh, guys, I'm feeling a little tired. Feeling a little drained, I gotta say. Life is a strange beast, you know? It's a strange thing that we're all going through and we're all participating in together. That we're all marching down this road, just constantly in this state of total bewilderment. And I hope that you're all doing really well out there, you know? I hope that everything's going well for you. I hope that you feel like you're making good choices, or that the forces of reality are pushing you in the right direction. I hope that you're sitting down. I hope that you're sitting down and taking time to look at yourself and to analyze your own thoughts and your own feelings and your own desires, and to get to know yourself. And to get to know yourself. I think that's one of the most important things a person can do, is to get to know themselves. But it's the most difficult thing for us to do. To just sit in peace and sit quietly and get to know yourself. I think that's tough. I think that's tough for people to do. And so we constantly reach out to distraction, to distract ourselves from ourselves. And yeah, I hope you're doing good, dude. Probably the heat. Yeah, it was a bit cool today, in fact, so I don't understand it. I think I'm just getting old, you know? I think I'm just getting old. I turned 40 this year, right? I hung around with my mom a lot fairly recently, and just the recognition, just the understanding that my mom is going to be gone soon. Not soon, not like tomorrow soon, but sooner than I'd like, you know? And that there is going to be a moment where it's just going to be me, right? It's just going to be me, and that my parents are going to be gone. One of the things that really keeps me going, right? Because we live in a society where the suicide rate is quite high, and I have a history of suicidal thoughts myself, and I have that kind of thing going on in my life. And one of the things that really keeps me going is understanding that I'm going to live in a world where the boomers are gone. That really tends to keep me going, because I really am curious to see that world, you know? I'm curious to see the world that is going to start getting built. I'm curious to see how many of the millennials and the Gen Z and the whatever generation is behind the Gen Alpha, I guess, which is just like burdening a generation. Gen Alpha. I hope not. I hope not. Those guys are going to be a pain in the ass with a name like that. But I'm curious to see how many of those guys actually stick on with a lot of this dumb neoliberal thinking and a lot of this, a lot of the racism, a lot of that kind of stuff. I wonder how much of that persists, and I wonder how the propaganda is going to change and the propaganda systems are going to change, because like they're quite clever and adaptive. Like one of the things I think about all the time is how close we were to getting cigarettes out of the society, and then they just turned it digital and created vaping, and now it's still around. You still have a bunch of people who are hooked onto nicotine. It's ridiculous. Why don't you join the Communist Party as a candidate? Working on it, bud. They're just names. I don't know what that's in reference to. Hope you guys are good. Like, share, subscribe, hit the bells, hit the whistles, do all the stuff. But yeah, like, we don't ever really pause and actually discuss, like, how we're alive, you know, how we exist in the world, that we exist. We're kind of caught in a frantic, manic reality. Like it's very frantic what we're all experiencing, right? Get up, do a thing, take a shit, shower, shave, go to a place that you barely tolerate to do a thing that you hate to do, make some money that most of it goes away because you got to pay rent, and come home, go to sleep, wake up, do it again, get a couple of days off, but really those days are just like making food for yourself and doing chores around the house, and maybe you get to sit down and like watch some TV or play guitar or something, or do the thing that you actually think you should be doing before you got to go to sleep and wake it up and do it all over again. Like, and this is what's quote unquote called life. Like we're all living, if you say so. Like if you say so. Like we're not meant to be like this, you know. Like we're not meant to be like this. That we're meant to exist and persist in a calmer way, and in a way that is more lovely than this, and that we have been caught up in a manic hysteria, that is absolutely burning out the species. It's not just burning out the civilization. It's not just burning out our people. It's burning out the species. This mass hysteria. And the mass hysteria is built around the discovery of oil. That we are entranced by the superpowers that we have granted ourselves through the burning of the dead and through the processing and usage of the dead. And these superpowers have turned our lives into a mania and have made us quite manic. And we've erected a reality around ourselves that cannot persist. It's too fragile. That life itself won't allow it to persist. That we just like run out of the oil, you know? Like, this is why I don't actually spend that much time discussing things like AI or future technology or any of these like discoveries that tech bros are getting all about. Like, yeah, okay, bud, like all that's really great and nice and all that kind of stuff. Like the oil runs out. And when the oil runs out, None of that's going to work. All your dumb AI stuff, all your digital currencies, all your stupid little toys and superpowers and all your planes and rockets and all this kind of stuff, none of it works anymore. Like, none of it works anymore. Right? Like, and sure, yeah, we could transition away from it. Sure we could. We're not going to. Like, we're not going to. We're not going to. We're not going to actually build the enough solar panels. We're not actually going to build an energy grid. We're not going to do any of that. Certainly not here in the West. Like, maybe China will to a certain degree, but none of it is going to be built so that the entire mass of the populace gets to have access to it. Like, none of that's going to be real. And, like, what are we going to live in a future where, like, we have an AI that's running on electricity, but we're not going to heat people's houses? Is that what we're looking at? Like, is that the type of future that we're actually looking at? And, like, Americans don't actually give a shit about that at all. They don't actually care about the hard factual reality that we run out of this oil. That it's gone. And that all of your dumb technology and all your stupid things and all this kind of stuff, like, it's fun, I guess, but, like, it's not going to last. And, like, future generations are going to look back on a lot of this stuff and just be like, what is this thing even? Oh, it used to run on something called oil. Well, what was that? Oh, well, they took the corpses of the dead and they put it through a chemical process that then they put into machines that they forged out of the earth, and those machines granted them superpowers. It allowed them to make rocks think. Matthew says, our society is very alienating and existence itself is so scary. I have so much sympathy for everyone while simultaneously being so proud of everyone for dealing with existing. It's so beautiful but also difficult. Yeah. Like, one of the things I think about all the time is, like, we really are just, like, hard and factual. We really are the universe expressing itself. That we are the universe attempting to figure itself out and attempting to discover what it is and what it's capable of doing. And really, I think that the best thing that we could do as a species would be to just chill the fuck out and start making art, start drawing, and making music, making movies, just talking in a non-rational way, and create painting. Just existing and producing art outside of the framework of needing to sell that art. And instead of that, where everything is caught in this manic need to sell everything to someone, and it's failing. And the whole thing is going to come down. Like, in big and obvious ways. And on basic things. Like, on basic premises. We run out of things. Like, this is why the whole electric car grift is a grift. We don't have the resources. Like, we literally do not have the resources to make a bunch of electric cars. Like, we straight up do not have it. Like, maybe we have enough resources to make a mass transit system. But these guys, these grifters, people like Elon Musk, walking around saying, like, oh yeah, electric cars are the future and all that, we literally don't have the resources for it. That it takes 15 times the amount of copper to make an electric vehicle. What you think we've got that? Like, copper is already scarce. Like, it's not going to happen. And yet, we're just plunging headfirst into all of these stupid ideas. Because, at the end of the day, we are a country of grifters and salesmen. We're not interested in plans that work or ideas that work. Yeah, they said the USSR was a living hell, when in reality, when you ask the elders, they say it was a wonderful nation. Yeah, you can read Michael Parenti's work on this. Have a good evening to you. Communism would be great if it wasn't for that goddamn human nature. I don't even understand what you're talking about, Matthew. Every single time I take a look at communism, it worked. Like, that's the thing that's so baffling about this conversation. Like, communism worked. That the Soviet Union fell, but there are good reasons for why it fell. And oh, I see. You guys, you got to start putting the sarcasm thing on it, dude. You gotta start putting the sarcasm stuff on it if you're gonna be sarcastic. You know, I'm too tired for this shit. Wait, have any of you considered 2 cows? 2 cows, man. Yeah. Communism works on paper, but the CIA and the U.S. military blows up your country. Yep. That's my favorite part about all of this. Is those people who are like, communism only works in theory. It's like, then why? If it fails by its own merits, then why are we spending so much money to destroy it? Like, really, the whole premise of this argument falls apart so easily. And it really is getting to the point where all of these arguments that the capitalists are putting forward fall apart so easily. And finally, their final argument, the only argument they actually have left is, look, we'll kill you. That's really the only thing they've got left. That will take you and relocate you. Move to another country, right? Like, that's essentially what you're saying when you say, why don't you move to another country, right? So, we'll relocate you. We'll murder you. That we will continue moving forward with this project of capitalism by force. That might makes right is essentially the fundamental backbone of capitalist thought and capitalist thinking. That it's correct because we can kill you. And who cares about how much poverty it spreads? Who cares about how many people it abandons? Who cares about the chaos and the discord that it obviously creates in the society? Who cares that it's plunging people into debt, peonage? Who cares that it's making the society stupider? Who cares about any of this kind of stuff? What matters is work harder for capitalists. That's what matters. It's pretty astounding. Like, it's astounding to me how little we actually value our own lives. Like, that's what's astounding to me. That instead of trying to live a life of exploration, discovery, not just self-discovery, but discovery of other countries, of other nations, of other people, instead of seeing reality as this wonderful, crazy, beautiful thing that we should be interacting with as often as possible for the fleeting little moment that we have, we just happily go work these stupid jobs for losers. Like, that's the wildest part about it. That we've been given this absolutely glorious gift. This absolutely astounding, wonderful gift, which is existence itself. That there is no reason for you to exist, and yet you do. And the existence that you have is the only thing you get. And that it's fleeting, and it falls through your hands like sand. And every day you look in the mirror, you find that time is leaving etches on your flesh until eventually you fade away into nothing. And all you ever had was the time that you were given. And we're all spending that time doing tasks we hate for people who despise us. while they themselves are on a manic pursuit for their own greatness, when the truth is that they'll never be great, that time will claim them too. And so the entire thing is a farce. The entire thing is a joke. The entire structure of capitalism, from its inception to this very moment and persistent through the future, is nothing more than the fantasy of a madman. And we're all just playing along, instead of acknowledging the absolute wonder and power of your own existence and your own life. And that you are not here to work for these narcissistic psychopaths. You are not here to work in a society for a people who would cut your throat if it made them a penny. You're not here to waste this time away on the pursuits of insane people. That your life would be better spent sitting on a beach. Your life would be better spent floating in the water, looking at the sky. Your life would be better spent walking down a trail through the forest. Your life would be better spent climbing up the side of a mountain than spending even one single moment working in a society that is doing everything it possibly can to destroy itself and the possibility of sustainable human life. Which is precisely and exactly what we're doing. Every single citizen, every single person should get up out of their chairs and walk out of their businesses. Walk out of their jobs, walk out of their houses, stop paying rent, stop paying for anything. And we should go and stand in the streets and demand an end to this psychotic madness. Go sleep under the stars. Your life would be better spent. Even if you do get your house, even if you do get your Bugatti, even if you do get the thing that you've spent your life to get, it too will fade in time. It'll start to click and clack like you will start to click and clack. And you'll look around yourself and you'll begin to actually wonder, why am I here? What am I doing here? What is this for? Why did I spend all that time to get this giant tombstone? That these are the conversations that the capitalists are the most afraid of. Because if everybody realized that the entire pursuit of wealth itself is at its base entirely fraudulent, and if everybody simply came to terms with what they have and came to accept the life that they had is good enough, and that the people who are around them are good enough, and that life walking down a boardwalk on the beach, floating in the water is a good life, well, the entire system of capital would collapse. Because a society that's at peace with itself is a society that doesn't want to buy your dumb bullshit. And eventually, we're going to have this forced upon us. Because these capitalists will abandon us. They are abandoning us. The housing market alone should show you that they are abandoning us. That they are beginning to participate in a game that they are purposefully excluding us from. That we are no longer allowed to be part of the game of capitalism. It's just like a game of Monopoly. Eventually, everybody gets pushed out of it. And when you get pushed out of it, you're going to have to come to terms with that. You're going to have to come to terms. And we are coming to terms with it. And I think one of the best ways we can come to terms with it is to simply say, I'm not here to please capitalists. I wasn't created by capitalism. Capitalism isn't what gave birth to me. That there are greater forces. There are things that are far more powerful and far more potent and far more meaningful. What's wrong with forcing things on people? Grinning? Is that a legitimate question? Yeah, the housing market is the biggest Ponzi enterprise ever done to a generation. Without a doubt. The housing market is the biggest Ponzi enterprise ever done to a generation. For sure. Like, this shit is getting too deep. I just want to give landlords a wedgie. Yeah. Well, part of the problem with what's going on in the housing market is that, as the capitalists do, that they've lied to us, right? That the capitalists do what the capitalists do, which is lie, right? And they have said to the boomer generation specifically, oh, if you buy a house, then you can turn that into an investment. That the commodification of housing, through this lie, that, oh, you can turn this into an investment, well, eventually there comes a point where your investment no longer works, because who are you going to sell it to? Right? Who do you sell the house to, eventually? And basically what's going to happen, and what is happening, is that all of these properties are going to be sold to Vanguard and BlackRock. That these are the emerging owners. These are the winners of the game of Monopoly. And it's essentially pricing children out of the market. And the older generation is going to get money, but that's a bad deal. Trading land for money is a bad deal. And it doesn't matter how much money, because land is more valuable by far. Land is more valuable by far. Because land exists and was created by reality. Money is paper that we printed out of nothing. And soon it won't even be paper. Just numbers that we punch into a computer screen. Until the computers no longer work. Because we've run out of fuel to run them. That's my favorite thing to think about. Is that there's going to be a manic scramble by the rich and the powerful to keep fueling their machine. Literally fueling it. Literally fueling it. They are going to run out of the fuel. It's going to be very funny to watch them try to keep the digital currencies going. It's going to be very funny watching them to try to keep all of this digital stuff up and running while they run out of the fuel. Like, that's going to be funny. Yeah, capitalism is awesome. We just need some purges like the commies. Just say you're a fascist, dude. Like, just say you're a fascist. All right, well, with that, I think I'm going to call it a bit early today, guys. Like, share, subscribe, hit the bells, hit the whistles. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.